I was pouring wine when I heard my father's voice slice through the kitchen air. "She won't fight back. She never does." The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. In that instant, I knew the truth. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was an easy target, someone to strip down to nothing, someone they thought would never resist. My name is Faye Winthrop, and that night, everything they believed about me began to die. The condo smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine, the kind of warmth I had always imagined when I dreamed of having a place of my own. For once, I wanted to believe this night would be different. A family dinner where laughter wasn't laced with judgment, where I didn't feel like a guest in my own story. I poured another glass of red, listening to the muffled hum of voices drifting from the living room. As I stepped into the kitchen, their words sharpened, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. My father's tone was low but certain, a verdict passed without trial. The sound rooted me in place, though my hand betrayed me. Trembling just enough for the stemware to slip from my grip, it hit the floor and shattered, shards scattering like a cruel echo of everything breaking inside me. I crouched to gather the pieces, careful not to let them see my face. The sting in my chest was hotter than the sting in my fingers when one shard pricked the skin. From the other side of the wall, their plans spilled out with casual certainty. Lydia moving in, making the space hers. My role erased as easily as crossing out a name on a page. I inhaled slowly, steadied my breath, and forced my lips into a smile before walking back out. To them, it must have looked like nothing happened, just another clumsy moment. But behind my steady gaze, something hardened. They thought I'd bow my head like always. They thought wrong. That night, after the front door closed and their voices faded down the hall, I stayed alone beside the Christmas tree. The twinkling lights blurred, pulling me backward through years I had tried to bury. When Lydia turned 8, she had a backyard filled with balloons, a clown making balloon animals, and a 3-tier cake covered in frosting roses. My 8th birthday was different, just a lukewarm Domino's pizza and a small homemade cake baked with what was left in the pantry. The ache of those years sharpened as I thought about my graduation day. I walked across the stage, diploma in hand, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. There was none. My parents were busy driving Lydia to buy things for her dorm room, and when I once refused her request for money, just once, they branded me selfish, a word that stuck like a scar. From that day forward, I was the shadow, the forgotten one, the daughter who simply existed in the background. The tree lights flickered against the window glass, and I finally saw the truth with piercing clarity. I had never been their choice. Not when I was a child, not when I became an adult, and certainly not now. If I didn't act, the only thing I had fought to keep, this home, would be taken from me without hesitation. The next morning, Lydia leaned against the counter with a grin too casual to be innocent. "Wouldn't it be fun if we moved in here with you? The kids would love it, and it would feel like one big family again." I let out a long, weary sigh, lowering my eyes as though the thought drained me. Then, with the faintest smile, I murmured, "Maybe it could work, if it helps everyone." Her face lit up, tears shimmering in her eyes. My parents exchanged a glance of pure relief, fingers lacing together across the table, as if they'd secured a victory. In their minds, I had slipped back into the role I'd always played, the older sister who carried the weight so no one else had to. But inside me, something shifted. I felt the heat of resolve running in my veins. Not weakness. For the first time, I understood that my silence wasn't a cage, it was a disguise. They believed I had surrendered, but I was already charting my next move. This time, my compliance was a mask, and behind it was the sharp edge of a plan none of them would ever see coming. I went by my mother's house under the pretense of dropping off a leftover ornament, something small and harmless. While she fussed in the kitchen, I lingered at the table and my fingers brushed a neat stack of papers. Curiosity pulled me closer. The top sheet had a formal header, legal language I recognized too well. My name, scrawled in a practiced hand, stared back at me. It wasn't just talk anymore. They had drafted a transfer, handwriting rehearsed to mimic my signature. For a moment, the room tilted. The casual whispers from the other night became concrete, cold, and official. When my father stepped into the doorway, he flashed a smile that tried to smooth over the moment and tucked the papers away like a guilty secret. "It's all for family unity," he said, voice too light. But the color bled out of my face, and a steel band closed around my chest. There was no more room for denial. Either I fought this, or I watched everything I had built be appropriated in broad daylight. I left with my hands clenched so hard the skin split on my palm, and a single steady thought pulsed behind my ribs. I would not be easy prey. I met Laura by chance at a weekday coffee shop, the kind of place where strangers' problems float into conversations. She looked at me with an old, exhausted frankness and told a story I'd only half remembered. How Lydia's husband had taken a key contract from under her. How reputation and work evaporated overnight. Her voice held no bitterness toward me, only a quiet ache I recognized. When I mentioned the condo, she set her cup down. "If you want out," she said without hesitation, "I'll buy it. Market price plus, no drama." The offer landed like a lifeline. In the hum of espresso machines and clinking mugs, a new plan crystallized. Sell, secure the funds, and deny them the satisfaction of stealing my life. That week, the sale papers were signed in secret. Transfers routed into a trust that would be untouchable. Walking back to my office, a calm I hadn't felt in years settled over me. Calm threaded with the sharp thrill of control. They still believed they'd won. I was already moving the pieces. From the moment I nodded my reluctant agreement, my family acted as if they had already won the war. Lydia posted a smiling picture on Facebook, her kids clutching boxes beside a rented U-Haul. The caption read, "New year, new home, moving into my sister's gorgeous condo downtown." The comments poured in with congratulations, heart emojis, and envy disguised as admiration. My parents proudly shared the post, adding their own flourish. "So proud of our children and the love that keeps us close." I stared at the screen, lips curling into a quiet smile, and tapped the like button without a word. To them, it was proof I'd accepted my fate, my silent stamp of approval. To me, it was a countdown. They paraded their victory online, while I and Laura had already signed every paper, every detail finalized. The keys no longer belonged to me. They belonged to her. But I wasn't done. I leaned into the role they'd assigned me. Submissive, yielding. I suggested curtain colors. Asked Lydia if she'd prefer blinds for the children's rooms. One afternoon, I even accompanied her to a home decor store. Nodding along as she spoke of her new place, she laughed, hugged me, called me the best sister anyone could hope for. All I did was smile. The deeper their confidence grew, the harder the fall would be. Every compliment they collected, every gushing remark from friends, only set the stage for what was coming. In the weeks that followed, the narrative spread like gospel. My parents glowed with self-satisfaction. Lydia boasted at church luncheons, and acquaintances nodded approvingly. "At last," they said, "Faye understands what family means. She's finally learned to give." I sat among them, sipping coffee, letting their words wash over me without protest. Some looked at me with pity, others with thinly veiled disdain. I didn't correct them. Why would I? Silence was my shield, and it was working better than any weapon, but the arrogance only swelled. One Sunday, I overheard my father discussing with an old family friend about getting the paperwork straightened out once Lydia's settled in. The certainty in his voice was staggering, as though my existence was already a footnote. Later, my mother, with her soft smile, suggested, "Perhaps you should think about clearing out some of your things, so there's room for the children." Her words cut, but I only nodded, as if compliance were second nature. What they didn't know was that elsewhere, another pen had already signed a far different set of papers. Laura, calm and deliberate, finalized the ownership documents with the building's management. On that day, the condo's title officially changed hands. While my family strutted through their dream of triumph, showing off a home they'd never truly owned, the truth was already sealed in black ink. They were rehearsing for a victory parade that would end in public humiliation. And I was there, quietly watching, ensuring every step they took led them closer to the cliff. The first Saturday of the new year dawned cold and gray, the kind of day when breath clouds the air and neighbors linger at their windows for entertainment. Right on schedule, a U-Haul truck rumbled to a stop in front of my building. Lydia hopped out first, her scarf fluttering, children squealing as they ran in circles on the sidewalk. Her husband barked orders, lugging boxes with the casual arrogance of a man certain of his place. Behind them, my parents shuffled proudly, directing the chaos like generals leading a parade. Curious neighbors leaned against railings, whispering. The air buzzed with speculation, phones raised discreetly to record. It was a spectacle, a public coronation of sorts, the moment my family thought they were taking possession of what was never theirs. My father marched to the door, keys clutched tightly in his hand. He jabbed one into the lock. Nothing. He tried again, jaw tightening, sweat gathering at his hairline, muttering. He shook the knob harder, tried another key, and another. Still nothing. His shoulders stiffened as he realized the performance was unraveling. Then came a voice, calm and steady, slicing through the winter air. Maybe that's because it isn't yours anymore. Heads turned. Laura stepped forward, wrapped in a crimson coat that seemed to glow against the bleak sky. In one hand, she held her coffee. In the other, a gleaming new set of keys. Without hurry, she slipped the key into the lock and turned. The door opened with effortless grace. This condo belongs to me now, she said, holding up a folder thick with official documents. Faye sold it to me weeks ago. Here's the proof. For a long beat, no one moved. My mother's lips parted, a strangled whisper escaping. No, that can't be. Lydia's face drained of color, the box in her arms slipping until it thudded on the pavement. My father's eyes darted wildly, searching for denial, escape, anything. Phones were no longer hidden. Neighbors openly filmed, the red recording light blinking like a spotlight of judgment. Murmurs turned to gasps, then to muffled laughter. The spectacle had reversed. What was meant to be a triumph had become a humiliation carved into digital memory. From my car parked at the corner, I watched it all unfold through the rearview mirror. My heart pounded, but it wasn't rage that filled me. It was release. Decades of silence, dismissal, and belittlement dissolved in that moment. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to confront. My answer stood at the door in a red coat, holding the keys that proved I had chosen my freedom over their chains. For the first time in 30 years, I felt the weight lift. My family might have believed I would never resist, but they had been wrong. Dead wrong. That night, while my family was still licking their wounds from the scene at the condo, Lydia found her stage. By 9 o'clock, her face filled every screen of those still connected to her online world. She sat in the passenger seat of their car, eyes swollen, mascara streaked in black rivers down her cheeks. Her children squirmed awkwardly in the back seat, clearly confused, but coached to stay silent. She clutched the camera close, as though speaking into it would absolve her. Her voice broke as she cried. My own sister betrayed us. We were thrown out into the street right after Christmas. Can you imagine that? She left us with nowhere to go. The performance was dramatic, tailored for maximum sympathy, and it worked, at least at first. Within minutes, the video gathered hundreds of comments and shares. Acquaintances typed in shock. How could Faye do this to her own blood? Strangers weighed in with accusations. Heartless. Ungrateful. No wonder she's alone. The narrative spun quickly, like a wildfire carried by dry wind. Even some distant relatives chimed in, shaming me publicly, without asking for the truth. For a brief moment, I sat in the dark, letting their words pour over me like ice water. I had predicted this. Counted on it even. I knew Lydia couldn't resist painting herself as the victim, and I had been preparing for weeks. At my desk, the glow of my laptop lit the room. My fingers steadied on the keys as I crafted my reply. This wasn't going to be a rant. It would be a presentation, evidence, clarity, the truth laid bare in black and white. I attached photos of the forged signatures I had discovered on my mother's dining table, each one clumsy but practiced, the strokes betraying hours of rehearsal. I added the email thread where my parents discussed moving Lydia into the condo, the casual cruelty of their words impossible to misinterpret. And finally, I wrote my statement. Not long but sharp, recounting decades of being overlooked, dismissed, and now nearly robbed of the one thing I had built for myself. When I pressed post, the silence stretched thin, like the air just before a storm. Then, like a dam bursting, the responses came. Notifications lit up my phone in rapid succession. My post spread faster than Lydia's video, ricocheting across community groups, alumni forums, and even local neighborhood pages. The comments began to shift, slowly at first, then in a wave. Faye, I remember your graduation day. You stood on that stage by yourself. I always wondered where your family was. Now I know. Lydia owes me $5,000 from that pyramid scheme she was peddling. Never paid a cent back. People need to see who she really is. I worked with your father. Always knew he played favorites, but I didn't realize how far it went. This is shameful. One after another, voices from my past rose to the surface. Old classmates admitted they had seen signs. Neighbors recalled years of watching Lydia praised while I was ignored. People who had once swallowed the story of a perfect, united family finally recognized the truth. Even members of my parents' church began to comment. We thought Faye was distant, but it looks like she was surviving in silence. By midnight, Lydia's video had turned into a punchline. Screenshots of my evidence spread faster than her tears ever could. Her cries of betrayal were now paired with captions mocking her hypocrisy. Where she had sought pity, she now found ridicule. My parents tried damage control. My father issued a statement, fumbling through excuses. The documents were drafts. The plan had been taken out of context. But the excuses only made things worse. People aren't fools. They know when the truth is plain before them. Every denial twisted the knife deeper, painting them as liars who had finally been caught. The fallout wasn't confined to screens. The very next day, my mother walked into the grocery store and felt the shift immediately. Aisles parting, whispers following her down every row. At church, no one would sit near them. Conversations broke off when they approached. Lydia's children came home from school bewildered, asking why their classmates were laughing at videos of their family on TikTok. The humiliation seeped into every corner of their lives, relentless and public. For decades, they had paraded an image of unity and righteousness, and now that mask was ripped away. The truth wasn't just exposed, it was amplified, dissected, and shared until everyone knew. And through it all, I didn't feel triumph in the way Lydia must have expected me to. What I felt was something far quieter, far stronger. I felt clarity. I had spent a lifetime believing my silence was weakness. That night, I realized it had always been power. I hadn't needed to scream or fight or beg for anyone to believe me. All I had needed was the light, and once it shone on them, it burned every lie they had built to the ground. A few months later, the cracks that had formed in my family's facade widened until everything collapsed. Lydia lost her job, her employer unwilling to weather the scandal she carried with her. Her husband filed for divorce soon after, taking custody of the children she once flaunted like trophies. My parents, stripped of their status and whispers of admiration, faced only scorn. At church, pews shifted away. In the neighborhood, no one waved. The shame became unbearable, and they were forced to sell the suburban home they had treasured for 30 years. Their new reality was a cramped rental apartment, barely a third the size of the condo they had tried to steal. I slipped out of Boston quietly. No announcements, no farewells. My new place sat on the coast of Maine, A modest condo where mornings began with the crash of waves against the rocks and the first light spilling across my window. Each day, I sipped coffee in silence, my phone blessedly still. No blame, no begging, no half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. One morning, I wrote my last message to them. I didn't leave family. I left the poison you called love, and I have no regrets. With a calm smile, I closed the laptop. For the first time in decades, freedom wasn't just an idea. It was mine,